Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here, and you are listening to episode 353 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. I have Eric Miller on the show with me today to talk about the brand new 7mm Backcountry rifle cartridge Federal just released. As you will learn here shortly, the 7 Backcountry utilizes an innovative design that produces some impressive ballistics. And it has some important potential advantages over cartridges like the 7mm PRC. Now, before we get started talking about that, I have a couple of announcements to share with you. So first, if you want to hunt Africa, we are almost full for 2025, but we have 2 spots remaining for hunts later this year. We also literally just started booking for 2026. I am recording this in January 2025, right in the middle of the rainy season for South Africa, and we have received lots of rain over there in the last couple of weeks. So the hunting is looking like it will be outstanding in 2025. And in 2026. As a matter of fact, I am actually going over to South Africa in July of 2025 with a couple of podcast listeners. I know we are going to have an outstanding trip. Visit bestsafarihunting.com for more details or email me, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com to book your dream hunt in Africa. Okay, now let's get started talking to Eric about the new 7mm Backcountry rifle cartridge. Well, good morning, Eric. It is always a pleasure having you on the podcast, and we have another very special show today to talk about a new cartridge from Federal. So tell us your elevator pitch about the 7 Backcountry, and then we can dive into the details.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. It's 7 Backcountry is our new cartridge, just launched, and I think to your point, the elevator portion of it is think of 7 Backcountry as a 20-inch barrel, 3,000 feet per second, 170 grain bullet. We have other offerings, but if you think of it in that context, 170 grain terminal ascent, traveling 3,000 feet per second out of a 20-inch barrel.
So your factory loads for the 7 PRC with your 170 grain terminal ascent bullet are advertised at about 2950 out of a 24-inch barrel. So you're getting velocity similar to or a little bit faster than that with a shorter barrel. And I'm assuming if you shoot that 7 Backcountry in also 24-inch barrel, you're able to get velocities even faster than that then, right?
We are, and we talk about that, and on the box for the 170 grain terminal ascent, on the front of the box, we show the velocity with a 24-inch barrel, because we want to be able to say, here's a 24-inch barrel, and when I'm comparing it to 7 Rem Mag, 300, 280 Ackley, 7 PRC, any of the other cartridges, I want to be able to compare it, apples to apples, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But on the back of the box and on our website and ballistically, when you look up the cartridge, you will be able to look up 20-inch velocities. And a lot of what we did when we were looking at backcountry and the engineers were developing this, the firearms market is going to shorter barrels, suppressors with how much easier they are to get, possess, how comfortable they are to shoot, all of that. They're just getting more and more popular. That is continuing. And this direction has been going to shorter barrels. And there are some people that have been taking some of these cartridges. The firearms manufacturers might have a 24-inch version, or they might have a 26-inch version, depending on the cartridge. But some people are cutting these barrels down, and now I'm losing a little of the performance that I originally had with this great cartridge, whatever caliber it may have been in. And what we were looking at is, how do I increase my performance, but take advantage of the shorter barrels? Because if I take a 24 or a 26-inch barrel firearm, put a suppressor on it that's 6, 7, 8, 9 inches long, my firearm now is pretty long and unwieldy. If I have a 20-inch gun or an 18-inch barrel in the 16.5-inch barrel, and now I'm putting a suppressor on it. I'm not losing the performance because I gained that performance with 7 Backcountry and what we have done to this cartridge to get it to perform with those shorter barrel lengths.
All right. So Hornady, when they designed the 7PRC, they used a cartridge that fit in a standard linked rifle action, but used a pretty fat case with it. Tell us about the overall appearance and dimensions of the 7 Backcountry.
So when you look at 7 Backcountry, it's standard action, standard overall length, the same as a 270, a 30-06. It doesn't necessarily have a parent cartridge, but if I were to compare it to something, it would be compared to a 280 Ackley improved when you look at it. When the engineers designed this case, it has essentially the same neck length as a PRC, and we designed it around what is the largest, heaviest hunting bullet that we could essentially find. We wanted to be able to shoot that bullet. Berger 195 grain Elite Hunter. There are heavier 284 bullets, but essentially they're target bullets. But we would be able to shoot, say, for instance, 197 grain Sierra Match King. But we wanted to be able to load the 195 grain Berger. It has 30-degree shoulder and has the same body taper as a 6.5 Creedmoor. So when you look at the cartridge, there's nothing that's, really out of the ordinary. There's nothing crazy about it. And being a standard action cartridge, standard bolt face, we get one more in the magazine. It is modern, but we didn't do anything really, really out of the ordinary to get the performance. The performance is because of the case. And that case is peak alloy, and that handles the pressure that we use to get the performance. So most cartridges, when you think of standard legacy cartridges, are somewhere between 60 and 65,000 PSI. And with 7 Backcountry and the peak alloy case, we are at 80,000 PSI. And that is how we gain the performance because of this cartridge. And if you think about it as the cartridge, this peak alloy case is the vessel that contains the pressure. The firearm doesn't really know if it's shooting brass or peak alloy because that pressure is contained within the case. And the gun doesn't know the difference.
All right. Very interesting. So we have a cartridge here that is delivering performance that matches or exceeds the 7PRC out of a shorter barrel. You're using a case that is a cartridge overall length that's more or less similar to the 7PRC, but in a much thinner case, a 280 Remington or a 30-06 diameter case instead of a Magnum case like the 7PRC. And you're doing this by running it at a higher pressure, and you can run it at a much higher pressure because you are not using a standard brass case. You're using this alloy case, right?
Correct. Yep, that is correct.
Now, the first thing that kind of comes to mind for a lot of people with cartridge cases that are not brass is steel cases, right? You think of, real crummy 7.62 by 39 steel case stuff, from Wolf or Red Army Standard or whatever from Russia, that it works fine in your AK, no problem. But man, I wouldn't want to run that stuff in a nice rifle. But it sounds like you're not using just a run of the mill steel case like that that's built just to be as cheap as possible.
No, we are definitely not. It is an alloy. And again, I refer a lot to the engineers at Federal, but they worked very hard on this and did a great job, but they looked at hardness and all. There's a lot of other aspects to the case when they were designing it. When we're talking about extractor wear and, everything that goes on, the dynamics that go on within the chamber because of the steel, they've reviewed all of that, looked at all of that, tested a lot of it. So it is peak alloy. It is a steel. It's plated. And if you look at our premium lineup, it will look very similar. It's nickel plated We have a lineup in fusion tipped that has a little different look to it, but still plated. So it is, yes, it is steel, but it is very different. It is not in the same, not even in the same family as what you had mentioned. It's a leap into the future. If you think about it, it's going from black powder to smokeless powder. And that's kind of how internally we have talked about what peak alloy does for us, is it takes us to that next step because of the performance of the case.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we talk about the ballistics and some of the other specific loads you're going to offer for it, one more question about the case, right? The other thing that jumps to mind when I think of a steel case thing, and it doesn't really have, it's not necessarily tied directly to it being a steel case, but they often go together hand in hand, is that especially that Soviet bloc steel case stuff is Berdan primed, and you can't reload it with the normal reloading gear that most people have in the USA. I'm assuming you use a boxer primer in this ammunition, and it is something that normal people will be able to reload with the right dies, loading data, etc.
Yep, correct, John. So we use a primer, gold metal primer, just like we do in all of our premium loads. And when we load this case, once it is formed, it goes on the primer insert and goes on the loader, just like a standard cartridge for us within the company. And yes, it is reloadable. As after 7 Backcountry launches, we'll have information on our website. We have a internal spec on the number of times to be reloaded, and we'll have essentially the recipe when we launch for being able to reload it. It will have a little different as far as the dies. We've been working with reloading companies, and they will have dies out there for it, but they'll be carbide, I would assume. And essentially there'll be some different nuances to reloading it, but yes, it will be reloadable.
And this is something, so you said gold metal primers. So, as people can use the normal primers that they have. I'm assuming large rifle primers in it.
Correct. Yep.
And normal 7mm bullets, same that you would use for the 7 rib mag, 7 PRC, etc. And then normal type powders that normal people will be able to buy. You're not necessarily tied to having some sort of proprietary stuff to get good performance out of this for a hand loader.
Yeah. So everything that is what you would normally reload as far as bullets, we're going to have 5 offerings on our side, but any 284 bullet that you would reload in 7 PRC or 7 mag, that doesn't change. Primer doesn't change. And the powder that we use internally when we're loading it here at Federal is essentially proprietary, but the powder is no different than what we load in a lot of other cartridges. It's the same powder that we load in a lot of our cartridges. The performance is not based on the powder. The performance is based on the case. Mm-hmm. And then when we do launch it, there will be equivalent powders out there that you'll be able to reload it with that, essentially, and internally for us, the powders that we have chosen are readily available. Like I said, again, we use them in a lot of other cartridges today. So that is not the secret sauce, I guess.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, tell us more about these different factory loads that you're planning on offering right out of the gate.
So we have 5 offerings right out to start. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, when they were designing the case, they kind of looked at what was out there, and the longest, heaviest hunting bullet essentially that we looked at was the 195 grain Elite Hunter by Berger. So that will be one offering in our premium lineup. We have a 170 grain Terminal Ascent bullet, which you had mentioned before also, that we load in PRC and other calibers cartridges. We'll have 155 grain Terminal Ascent, and then we will have a Barnes LRX 168 grain offering. And then in our Fusion Tip lineup, we will have a 175 grain Fusion Tip bullet, which is a molecularly bonded bullet we put out last year, which was new last year, but great bullet, and that will be an offering also in 7 Backcountry.
Can you share velocities for these different loadings?
Yep. So the 170 grain will be with a 24-inch barrel is 3150, and it'll be about 3,000 feet per second with a 20-inch barrel. The 155 is 3150 out of a 20-inch barrel. The Burger Elite, and I think all of these will be out of the 20-inch barrel that I will let you know. The Burger Elite, the 195, is a 2850. The Barnes LRX is 3,000. And our Fusion tipped out of the 20-inch barrel is 2975.
Okay, very good. So as far as I know, nobody makes a factory load for, say, the 7PRC with that 195 grain Burger, but I know Copper Creek, they do. Where, they're one of those custom hand loading companies, and they advertise 2725 out of a 24-inch barrel with that bullet. And so you're saying 2850. So a little over 100 feet per second faster with that really long bullet out of a barrel that's 4 inches shorter.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that is darn impressive. And then, of course,
and I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, John. I think we'll look up real quick, but out of a 24-inch barrel, the Burger Elite Hunter is 3,000 feet per second.
Yeah.
So if you're comparing 24 to 24.
Yeah, so that's quite a bit faster than that. I don't know what people are getting hand loads with velocities using hand loads with that bullet out of the 7PRC, but but this goes to show that you designed that cartridge specifically to use that really, really heavy bullet, and you're advertising velocities that are pretty darn impressive with it.
Yeah, and that bullet, obviously 195 grain, it's Burger's J4 jacket. That is a definite, that will be one of our top ones, obviously, just because of the weight, the ballistics, the accuracy that you get out of that bullet versus, say, a bonded bullet. They'll all be popular, but I think that one will have a real special place for a lot of people.
Yeah, so you advertise 3,200 feet per second for the 28 Nosler with the 155 grain terminal ascent, and the 7 Backcountry you're advertising 3,150. So darn near 28 Nosler performance when both are out of 24-inch barrels like that. But you're getting it with a
correct
with a much smaller case with the 7 Backcountry.
Yeah.
Very interesting mix here. How all the different recipes that people can use to get different places with the different things that you can play with. Make the case really long, make it fat, or you can go shorter and thinner like you and up the pressure and get that level of performance and still out of a shorter barrel like that. What twist rate are we looking at with this cartridge?
1 in 8 is what the gun manufacturers will have, and that our SAMI submission is a 1 in 8 twist.
Okay, very good. Let's see here. What else do we need to talk about with this cartridge? It seems like it's pretty darn impressive right out of the gate here with this level of stuff, especially with that shorter barrel like that too. So, okay, you teased this earlier with the shorter barrels. They're becoming more popular, especially with people using suppressors. Talk to us about using this cartridge with a suppressor, with it being such a high pressure round.
So the pressure at the chamber is 80,000, but the muzzle exit pressure is the same as, say, 7PRC. So the muzzle exit pressure there is no correlation to the chamber pressure because, again, that chamber pressure is being contained by the cartridge and the way that the powder burns, but the muzzle exit pressure is equivalent to 7PRC. So be able to use it with any suppressor that you or I would shoot with essentially a legacy cartridge in that caliber.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very interesting. What about recoil? Just like you and I talked about before we started recording, I'm just trying to weigh a bunch of stuff in my head here, right? Recoil is calculated by your bullet weight, bullet velocity, rifle weight, in your powder charge. And so you're getting, say, same bullet weight, similar or faster velocities versus the 7PRC, but you're using a much smaller case to do that. And so I'm guessing we're burning less powder, even though it's a mixture that's giving you such a high pressure, a higher pressure than the 7PRC. So how is this going to compare recoil wise to some of these other cartridges, 7 Mag, 7PRC, etc.?
You're right. It has less powder. You're not throwing a whole bunch of powder down the barrel. And I think if I handed you a backcountry or I handed you a 7PRC, for example, and depending on which one I had you shoot first, everything that we've shot, everything that we've looked at, when we launch, we'll have the data out there as far as, the actual felt recoil. Mm-hmm. It is comparable to a 7PRC. And I think, if I handed you one gun, said shoot this, and then handed you a 7 backcountry first, you would say, oh, the backcountry's less. But I think it's a perception of when the first shot that you have, the recoil is what it is. But on that second shot, you might be expecting recoil a little bit. But the bottom line for us is it's comparable to 7PRC in recoil.
Very interesting. Okay. And so, man, it seems like such an amazing concept where you're able to get that level of performance out of a shorter barrel like that. And so you could, take a 20-inch barrel, or actually, well, I guess here's the other question too. What rifle manufacturers are going to be picking this up out of the gate, and what barrel lengths does it look like they're going to be offering this cartridge in?
So I believe for launch, there's 13 gun companies. So we'll obviously have them on our website. They'll have the models once we launch. They'll be posting the models. But, some examples: Christensen, Savage, Seekins, Fierce, Geisley, Horizon, they're Pure Precision. So there's a lot of gun manufacturers that will have. Weatherby is another big one that we've been working with from the start. And I believe they have 13 models that they will have out. So there'll be a wide range of, price points, gun manufacturers, and they'll have guns from 16.5-inch barrel lengths, 18, 20, and 22, I think.
Interesting. Any idea what sort of velocities a person could expect with a 16 or an 18-inch long barrel with this cartridge?
Right up, I don't. I know the answer. I'd have to look it up to be exact, and I don't want to put it out there if I don't have the number right in front of me. We'll have that on our website. We'll be posting some of those velocities. But, when we were shooting, we've been testing in all the different barrel lengths. And again, we'll have that data out there when we launch.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting that you'll be able to get, say, performance approaching a 7 Mag, perhaps, say, out of a 16 or an 18-inch long barrel like that, but using a barrel that's 4, 6, 8 inches shorter, depending on the cartridge, or on the details with it here. Seems like we have I'm sure they're not related, but it seems like a similar concept to what SIG did with the 277 SIG Fury. And so for the listener who doesn't know what I'm talking about, this cartridge SIG released a couple years ago. It is a short action cartridge, so 308 length, so it's shorter than this. But it has a steel case head on it, brass remainder of the case. It also operates at 80,000 PSI. And that cartridge, you're getting velocities similar to the 270 Winchester, out of a short action cartridge, out of a 16-inch barrel too. And so this cartridge is physically longer than that, and it's it's not steel, but it's a steel alloy case operating at a similar pressure, and you're getting more performance out of it than that, out of a little bit longer-ish barrel.
Yep, and the case is, it is a one-piece case. When we're in production, as we go through the process, this starts out and goes through, put it on a head turn, then form it, and then anneal it, and then plate it. It's very similar to how we produce a brass case, just one piece, peak alloy. And, once it's formed, plated, it loads very similar to what we would load today in the factory.
Mm-hmm. Now, you touched on this earlier, but I do think it is worth discussing it again just to reinforce the point. When a lot of people see a real high-pressure cartridge like this, 80,000 PSI, it's only natural to think, gosh, is this safe to use in my rifle? Touch on that again about the safety aspects of it with this new case design.
Yep. So obviously, safety is paramount for us. We've tested it extensively, and it is safe. And it's safe because, again, we've touched on it a couple of times, but the case itself, the 7 Backcountry cartridge, but specifically talking about the peak alloy case, is able to contain that pressure. So that case is acting like the vessel that contains all of the pressure of that 80,000. Mm-hmm. So again, the gun doesn't know the difference. And we've obviously worked with the firearms manufacturers, so no headspace growth. We send them proof loads, which are well above, obviously, the 80,000. You can shoot it with a proof load. The gun doesn't fail. They can take that pressure. But central to our development of this is safety. And we are going to make sure that the gun doesn't have any type of failure shooting 80,000. And again, the gun doesn't know the difference if it's shooting brass or peak alloy.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. This definitely seems like it is too good to be true, that you're able to get this level of performance out of a smaller case like that, out of a shorter barrel. But at the same time, you're also saying that this is a revolutionary, game-changing sort of design. That certainly seems to be the case, but I'm interested to check it out myself and see what the deal is. I'm assuming you've had this cartridge out there in the hands of people hunting with it over the last year or so. Can you share some of the examples of what you guys have done with it?
Yeah, we've had it. We had it on quite a few hunts this past fall, and even so, it would have been the fall of 23. Some of the prototypes were out in the field, harvested elk and deer, mule deer, things like that. But we've had it out. Marketing has had it. We've had, various firearms manufacturers and their firearms out with us, building the campaign essentially for 7 Backcountry. But we had it out extensively this fall, and again carried it in forms of generally 20-inch barrels, but a lot of it was shooting suppressed. I was on a hunt in Manitoba, caribou hunt. We couldn't shoot suppressed, but both of the people that harvested caribou were shooting 20-inch rifles, and performance was fantastic, just as we would have expected. Using our bullets and the firearms, it was a first-class experience for those guys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you listed a bunch of the companies that are offering rifles for it. You talked about the 5 federal-specific ammo offerings out of the gate. Any other ammo companies you know of that are going to pick it up soon? Are we going to see something from Remington?
To start with, it will just be federal. And as we get through launch and go through it, obviously Remington would be a natural progression for us. I don't know for sure at this time when or what we would have in that offering, but that would be a logical next step for us. But we want to make sure that we cover all the bases on the federal side, make sure that we are, up and running to get efficient at loading, making sure that we can fill the demand that we expect. We're loading it today, actually before launching, but we, are hoping to continue to get out in the market, make sure that it's in plenty of inventory for people to shoot. And then again, I'll go back to natural progression would be, the next step would be for Remington, but I don't know the time frame for that one.
Okay. Well, very, very good. Anything else that we need to talk about with the 7 Backcountry before we move on to our closing questions?
No, I don't. I think, as the development process went through, we had a lot of great partners. Like I said, we worked extensively with Christensen and Weatherby. Proof Research was a great partner to start with barrels. They will have a gun out also. But, as we were going through this process, this is a big launch for us. We think this is kind of revolutionizing where we're at today and sets us up for the next steps down the road. But we are really excited about, what the engineers and what we've done here to increase performance, and offer something new for the customer and get what they're asking for in the shorter barrel rifles. We're really excited about it.
I am very interested to see what else could come out in the future from you guys using this concept. This is a long action cartridge. I'm interested to see what you can come out with in a short action or even something, say, 223 size. But I'm sure stuff like that along those general lines is in the works. You're welcome to tell us whatever you can about it. But if you can't, I understand.
It is in the works. The engineers they're obviously already working on the next iterations of all of this. I can't say what it is, but yeah, they're hard at work right now, probably doing that exact same thing.
All right. Well, good deal. So people that want to learn more about the 7 Backcountry can go to federalpremium.com/backcountry, all one word, backcountry. You guys will have a website up there with all the pertinent details about that cartridge so people can check it out. Before we wrap up, Eric, I'm going to ask you the question I will ask every single guest on the Big Game Hunting Podcast in 2025. You must choose one. Either you hunt for the rest of your life with a single cartridge, and you can use any bullet if you go that route, or you must hunt with any single bullet, but if you go that route, you can use any cartridge with that bullet. What is your decision, and what's the cartridge or bullet that you choose here?
Oof, that is a great question. I would pick Terminal Ascent. And I would pick Terminal Ascent, even though we're talking about backcountry. I think maybe some people would say, well, you should have picked backcountry, but I also have some other rifles in my gun safe, and I want to be able to shoot them all. So I think I would pick Terminal Ascent so I can continue to shoot some of my legacy cartridges. One of those would be in backcountry, but I would want to be able to shoot Terminal Ascent bullets and then be able to continue to kind of shoot what I have in my stable of firearms.
Yeah, I mean, you go that route, you can go the 270, 30-06, 6.5 Creedmoor, and of course, the new 7 Backcountry and anything else that comes out along those lines. I asked people on my email list this question, and a lot of guys responded back with the Terminal Ascent bullet because it gives you that good performance up close, but it's accurate, has a high BC, and it also still does well at extended range. So I could understand why you like that cartridge, or excuse me, that bullet. I had good results with it on my moose hunt this past year, and I'm looking forward to trying it out in some other cartridges afield here in the future too.
Good. Sounds good.
All right. Well, Eric, it is a pleasure having you on the show again today. Thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to tell us about this new cartridge. Have a great day and have a great 2025.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Okay, so to recap, the 7 Backcountry has ballistics that meet or exceed the performance of the 7mm PRC, but that new cartridge can achieve that performance out of a shorter barrel, and it uses a significantly smaller case to do so. The end result is the 7 Backcountry has similar recoil, you can get that performance out of a more compact rifle, and you can fit an additional round in the magazine for the 7mm Backcountry versus the 7mm PRC. So, at least in theory, this cartridge purports to give you all the great things you loved about the 7 PRC, plus that little bit of additional performance with those other benefits. And yes, you can reload the 7mm Backcountry. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you're probably familiar with the fact that I really like the 7mm PRC. That's my favorite cartridge right now. Well, we'll see what the future holds with the 7mm Backcountry, but this round definitely has the potential to replace the 7mm PRC. Now, like I said, we'll see what the future holds. We'll see how this round actually performs afield and if it lives up to expectations. But this sort of design, like I have teased in a couple of my other previous podcasts, definitely has a lot of potential going forward. And if you apply the sort of design principles the folks at Federal utilized with the 7mm Backcountry to other cartridges, this truly could be a revolutionary step forward in cartridge development. So I am excited to check it out, and I will keep you posted on how it performs for me. You can learn more about the 7mm Backcountry at federalpremium.com/backcountry. Link is in the show notes as well. Now, if you are listening to this episode on Spotify, take a second and please answer the poll question for this episode. Do you think the 7mm Backcountry will replace the 7mm PRC? Yes or no? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. And finally, email me, john@thebiggameHuntingblog.com, or visit bestSafariHunt.com to learn more about the hunts we are offering in Africa for 2025 or 2026. We would love to set you up with your dream hunt over there this year. Now remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. I'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today,